In the heart of the Jedi Temple, Anil Kesh, a shadow creeps across the sanctum of knowledge and peace. Dagon Lok, a once revered Jedi Master, defies the rigid traditions of his order and descends into the forbidden chasm below the temple. His companion, Hawk Ryo, follows him, drawn by a sense of duty and curiosity. The cavern resonates with the echoes of ancient power as the two plunge into a rampant whirlpool of visions. Amid the tempest, a sinister apparition emerges, clutching blades of frozen fire. Driven to the brink of madness by the haunting vision, Dagon Lok struggles to comprehend the portents of darkness and the imminent threat to the galaxy. As the reverberations of his descent ripple through the Jedi Order, the first stirrings of the Force Wars begin to awaken. Dagon Lok jolted awake, his breath ragged as Tave frantically shook him from a violent nightmare. The terror in Dagon's eyes was unmistakable, his heart still racing from the vision. A flesh-eating army had filled his mind, beings not of this world, ravenous and unstoppable, spreading death and destruction in their wake. Tave, alarmed by the intensity of what Dagon had seen, knew this was no ordinary dream. Though they didn't know the name of these invaders, the threat felt real and the dread lingered. Wasting no time, the two left Bogan, determined to return to Tython. They would secretly gather a faction of Jedi, preparing for the arrival of this mysterious, terrifying force. On Tython, Grandmaster Ketu is teaching a valuable lesson at the Temple of Ceh'let, guiding Jedi on the Ashla, the light side of the Force that guides their pursuit of balance. Shay Koda, a skilled ranger known for her fiery spirit. Seknos Wrath, a forceful and daring protector. And Tasha Ryo, a wise diplomat and mediator, listens closely to Ketu as he warns of the dangers of imbalance and conflict. He explains that the Ashla is more than light. It is a delicate harmony that exists both within and around them. As the lesson deepens, Shay feels a sudden ripple in the Force, a disturbance near Maharakesh, stirring a feeling deep within that she cannot yet explain. On the orders of Ketu, they are sent out to investigate this mysterious anomaly felt throughout the temple. The crashed starship lies in ruin, water dripping from its hull as Shay, Wrath, and Tasha hold it onto the shore near Maharakesh. The eerie quiet settles over them, broken only by the sound of the waves and their breathing. Without warning, the ship's hatch opens with a hiss and a figure emerges. A cloaked shadow, one eye burning like fire. Leaping from the wreckage, igniting a force saber with a sharp, menacing hum, this purple blade springs to life, crackling with untamed energy, a weapon far beyond anything the Jedi had seen. Their force-imbued blades no match as each was sliced through effortlessly, its strikes precise and brutal, leaving them stunned by the raw power. Just as hope began to fade, Dagon Lok arrives, hoping to sway the tide of this monumental battle. Dagon Lok arrives with a legion, his presence immediately shifting the balance as he rushes to aid his fellow Jedi. Just as he joins the fray, the cloaked figure with the fiery eye lets out a surge of power, sending Shay, Wrath, and Tasha flying with a massive force push. Dagon stands firm, resisting the blast, locking eyes with the enemy. A deadly duel erupts, Dagon narrowly dodging the crackling purple blade as it cuts through the air with fiery intensity. With a swift motion, Dagon attempts to lock the figure in force stasis, straining to hold him. The fiery-eyed figure almost breaks free, his strength immense. But just as Dagon begins to falter, the other Jedi rise and lend their combined power, finally subduing the invader. Tasha walks over to Dagon, hugging him, and suggests they go back to the High Council immediately. The masked figure lies on a healing cot, grappling with pain as flashes of a mysterious past flickers through Shay's mind as she stands ready and alert. Surrounded by Selkath healers, this mysterious foe tries to resist the restraints that hold it down. The tension in the air thickens as Shay approaches, her voice steady and soothing, urging it to calm down. With a gentle yet firm touch, she removes the mask, revealing his human features for the first time. As the mask falls away, a wave of tranquility washes over the room. "Zesh," he says, before falling back into his mind as silence falls across the temple. Temple Master Madog and Hawk Rio both enter the room, a darkness they sense not felt since the Despot War. At Marrakesh, the Jedi gather to test the mysterious Force Saber, a weapon said to harness the dark side of the Force. Temple Master Tem Madog steps forward to ignite it first, but despite his deep connection to the Force, it refuses to activate. One by one, other Jedi try, each met with failure. Then Hawk Rio, whose subtle dark side tendencies have not gone unnoticed, steps up and effortlessly ignites the weapon, casting a fiery purple glow across the room. Hawk feels a surge of dark side energy within him, but the focus soon shifts back to Zesh. Though Zesh suffers from memory loss, many were intrigued by his potential, however wary of his dark and erratic connection to the Force. Recognizing the dangerous power within him, the Jedi exile him to Bogan to learn control and balance in isolation. Locke stood before the High Council, his tone urgent, bordering on manic, as he implored them again to heed the warning of his visions. He spoke of a great threat, flesh-eaters that would descend upon them, a disturbance in the Force that only he could feel. His words became more forceful, almost frenzied, as he accused the Council of blind ignorance, too rooted in their beliefs of balance to recognize the danger. The Council, unmoved and seeing his growing instability as a threat to their order, banished him once more from Tython. As Dagan left, Hawk Rio appeared from the shadows and approached the High Council. "There is something I must show you all." Zesh had been isolated on Bogan for some time. Alone on the barren moon, he honed his skills in solitude until Dagan Locke, drawn by his dark side energy, found him. The two forged an unlikely bond, united by their shared understanding of the Force's darker currents. Together they trained, blending their knowledge and pushing their abilities further than before. Soon they left the moon, seeking out others who shared their vision and rallying more Bogan warriors to their cause. Zesh, with his knowledge in crafting Force sabers, became a mentor to these new recruits and taught them how to forge one. As whispers of their growing power spread, other Jedi, drawn to the dark side, defected to their ranks. With their faction growing, Zesh and Dagan knew their time on Bogan was nearing its end as they planned their next step, leaving the moon to seek even more allies in the Tython system. Tave, the master of Stav Kesh, stood at the edge of the training arena, his presence commanding as the lesson concluded, sweat still glistening on the foreheads of his students. Seknos Rath and Shay Kota were eager, but Tasha Rio hesitated, her gaze distant, clearly preoccupied with thoughts of Dagan Locke. Tave noticed her distraction, a brief flicker of concern crossing his face. Without pausing, he reminded her of the importance of focus, a silent but sharp warning that her mind needed to be on the task ahead. With the lesson finished, Tave gave them their next directive. It was time to embark on the great journey, visiting each temple on Tython to find true balance within themselves. The trials would challenge not only their physical and mental strength, but also their deepest connection to the Force. Skal'nas, the cunning and ruthless Rakatan commander, stood aboard his warship, his gaze fixed on the void ahead as his fleet prepared for the invasion of the Tython system. Confident in the infinite Empire's power, he dismissed any threat as a minor obstacle, unaware of what he was truly about to find. At his side stood Trill, his most trusted and lethal Force hound, whom he tasked with infiltrating Tython. "Find this planet," Skal'nas commanded, his voice cold as they exited hyperspace, the desolate world of Fury's Gate below them. As Trill departed on her mission, Skal'nas turned toward his war council, a glint of ambition in his eyes. "Descend my warriors, crush any who stand in your way, find me what I desire." The Force war had begun. The Rakatan assault on Fury Station was swift and brutal. Still recovering from the Despot War 13 years earlier, they were outnumbered and overwhelmed. The Jedi defenders fought fiercely, but the shocking and sudden arrival of the Rakatan forces, with their immense might and weapons, destroyed all station defenses abruptly. The Jedi starfighters in orbit managed to take down several of their enemies in desperate skirmishes. Others tried to flee, but were surrounded on all sides, while war droids and flesh raiders landed and tore through the remaining defenses with deadly precision. Despite their valiant stand, the Jedi were ultimately outmatched, and Fury Station fell in hours. With no survivors, no warning could reach Tython. The station was captured, and silence fell once more on the outer skirts of the system. Seknos Wrath, Shea Koda and Tasha Rio embark on the Great Journey, a perilous rite of passage for Jedi journeyers to master their connection to the Force. Together, they traversed Tython's wild landscapes, confronting beasts, violent Force storms, and untamed terrain as they visit each of the 9 temples. Each stop brings new trials, from the alchemical mysteries of Anil Kesh to the survival trials of Qigong Kesh and the martial arts of Stav Kesh. Intense challenges pushed them to their limits, but they found a deeper understanding of the Force and themselves, culminating at the Forge of Vur Tepe. Emerging as seasoned and confident disciples, they receive an urgent holocall from Master Ters Sendan, asking them all to come to Ceh'let as whispers of Zesh and Degan Locke's escape from Bogan flows in the air. As Trill piloted her ship in search for Tython, she reflected on her past, remembering how she and the other hounds had looked out for each other during their harsh upbringing. Yet, when pitted against one another in brutal contests, she had narrowly survived by outmaneuvering her opponents, ultimately becoming a prize servant rather than a mere slave to the Rakata. Her eyes open, and just as she passes into the atmosphere of Krev Kur, a sudden movement catches her eye. A figure plummeting from a mountainside in the heat of battle. Accelerating in her ship, she swooped down just in time to catch him, discovering the red-skinned humanoid Seknos Wrath, battered and injured. They land down in a forgotten forest as Trill begins to treat this warrior, set on healing him, at least for now. Master Ters Sendan stared intently at the holocron, his frustration mounting as yet another attempt to unlock its secrets failed. As he sighed and set it down, Tasha Rio entered the chamber beneath Ceh'let, her curiosity piqued by his summons. Without a word, he gestured her over, explaining the holocron's ancient origins and its mysterious resistance to his efforts. When Rio reached out and touched it, the room was bathed in an otherworldly glow as Anang, the holocron's creator, appeared. Anang spoke of the Qua and their mastery of a cosmic power, which Sendan recognized as the Force. But when Rio produced an unfamiliar skull she found, Anang's tone shifted, and with a gasp he cried, "Rakata," and vanished, leaving them both in a stunned silence. The Jedi gathered on the dark moon of Bogan, only to find it eerily quiet and Degan Locke missing. As they scoured the desolate landscape, a pack of ravenous Terrantatek ambushed them, forcing the group into a fierce and desperate battle. After defeating the creatures in a tense fight, Ranger Rio led the team to Locke's old hideout. There, Shea Koda noticed strange carvings on the walls, a towering, bearded figure wielding a force saber with divine authority. At first, they suspected Zesh, but Rio recognized Locke's handiwork, his madness etched in stone. The memory of their shared vision flooded back, a vision so dark it had nearly broken him. Now, it was clear. Locke had escaped with Zesh, the only one capable of forging a force saber. Splitting up, the Jedi set out, determined to stop Locke's plans before it was too late. Following the fall of Fury Station, Skal'nas ordered the destruction of the gas giant's mining facilities and the capture of its 7 moons. The capture of the gas giant Maw was a brutal campaign that showcased the Infinite Empire's merciless efficiency. Rakatan warships descended in force, unleashing devastating barrages that reduced orbital platforms to molten wreckage. Ground forces stormed settlements on the moons, enslaving survivors and annihilating those who resisted. The once thriving colonies were turned into desolate outposts of Rakatan dominance, their resources harvested to fuel the war machine. With Mawr captured, Skal'nas set his sights further into the system, eagerly awaiting his prize. Master Jake Fen, Seknos Wrath, and Ranger Belzana tracked the fugitives Zesh and Dagon Lok to the crystal mines of Krev-Kur. In the heart of the mines, battle erupted. Fen clashed with Lok, each strike of their sabers sending sparks flying off the crystal walls. Nearby, Wrath dueled Zesh, their force powers colliding in bursts of energy. Lok taunted Fen, exploiting his frustration before delivering a brutal slash across his chest. Zana lunged at Lok, but he twisted the force, hurling her toward a cliff's edge. Zesh unleashed a wave of dark energy, forcing Wrath to his knees, but Wrath rose, deflecting a fatal blow and charging Zesh. Lok seized his moment, engulfing Zana's mind with the feeling of being burned alive, force pushing her over the cliff with a flick of his hand. Wrath leapt after her, force throwing her back up as he fell, and Lok and Zesh escaped. Fleeing to the factory world of Nox, Lok and Zesh seized control of Grat's foundry, with Lok using a mind trick to convince its owner of a Nashtar infestation. Lok washed away the filth of imprisonment and began working on armor. Zesh focused on crafting force sabers, imbuing their crystals with the dark side. While work was being complete, Lok set out for Scrag's cantina to recruit some old friends, Hadia's surviving generals. He unveiled his hood, revealing his identity, trying to convince the wary ex-generals to join his cause, raising an army to invade Tython and save the Jedi from the threat of his vision. Tensions grew, and Lok grew impatient, igniting his force saber, and with a thunderous surge of light they watched in awe. Afterwards, Zesh arrived, warning that the Jedi were closing in and announcing that his work was complete. Goda's heart raced as she found Zesh beneath the dim neon glow of Scrag's cantina on Nox. Her accusation was fierce, betrayal, murder, as her heart blazed with righteous fury. Zesh stood unflinching, offering her the same ultimatum he had given Wrath: walk away or face death. Their blades clashed in a violent dance, but their duel was abruptly interrupted as the ground shattered beneath them, a monstrous Dianoga surging forth. Dragged into the depths, Koda fought for her life. Zesh hesitated, then plunged into the murky abyss, slaying the beast and pulling her to safety. As she gasped for air, his mercy turned to chains. "You're my prisoner now," he declared coldly, before escaping with Lok. Moments later, Hawk Rio's calm crackled with unexpected hope. Seknos Wrath lived, saved by a mysterious figure named Trill. The Rakatan invasion of Obri's moons was a merciless show of power, led by Skal'nas, who launched simultaneous assaults on Milan, Dreska, and Zerist. Milan's gas mining platforms were obliterated by orbital bombardment, leaving the moon a wasteland of wreckage. On Dreska, Rakatan troops stormed the mines, swiftly crushing resistance, seizing resources and enslaving survivors. The fiercest resistance came on Zerist, where in the city of Kainan, defenders held the line near the Tul'kar volcano. Rakatan warships filled the dark skies, their firepower reducing the city's geothermal towers and defenses to rubble. Zerist's militia fought valiantly, barely slowing the invaders. However, the volcano began to destabilize, as evacuation alarms drowned out the sound of screaming. Barely evading capture, Lok and Zesh split up when Hawk Rio arrived in Boneyard City. Lok used a mind trick to create an illusion of himself, leading Rio into a futile battle against a phantom Lok that confronted him about their shared vision in the chasm before vanishing dramatically. Meanwhile, the real Lok regrouped with Zesh at the spaceport, where Zesh had captured Shea Koda, one of their pursuers. Narrowly escaping, they set their sights on Shika'aqua, where Lok anticipated meeting another old acquaintance. Dagon, Zesh, and Koda reached Shika'aqua, determined to gather an army. Lok clouded Koda's mind, keeping her docile. Using a mind trick, he secured passage into Rio Fortress, the stronghold of Clan Rio. Lok confronted the Baron Volnos, recalling how he helped him infiltrate the despot army and kill Queen Hadia. Tensions rose when Rio questioned Zesh's servitude to Dagon and unleashed a security droid. Angering Zesh, he pulled the Baron into the line of fire, then battered the shots away, stating he serves no one. Their standoff ended as Hawk Rio and his allies stormed in. Refusing to surrender, Locke collapsed the ceiling and escaped to the roof, ordering Zesh to follow with Coda. On the roof, he clashed with Hawk Rio and severed his leg. Dagon's triumph ended as Coda broke free and turned against him. Furious, Locke demanded Zesh kill her. As the evacuation alarms blared across Canaan, the city was consumed by chaos. The Varitai surged forward, overwhelming the last lines of resistance, while the Kuritai dismantled any defense with brutal efficiency. Civilians fled to the glowing caverns, hoping for safety, but Sokar volcano erupted in violent fury, spewing ash and fire that choked the air and destabilized the battlefield. Rakatan warships hovered above, targeting both defenders and the fleeing population. Under Skal'nas's cold command, no mercy was shown. His forces bombarded the caverns, collapsing them in fiery explosions that buried thousands alive. The militia's desperate stand was crushed as the Rakatan firepower reduced the city to molten ruin. Skal'nas proclaimed Zerist conquered and Obri's moons under Rakatan control. Locke commanded Zesh to kill Coda, intending to eliminate her and then strike down Rio. But Coda's plea broke through Zesh's turmoil, urging him to make his own choices. Zesh turned on Locke, vowing never to serve anyone again. Enraged, Locke attempted to overwhelm Zesh by diving into his mind, but the abyss of pain and darkness within Zesh backfired, leaving Locke nearly unconscious. The Jedi swiftly captured Locke and returned him to Tython, where the Council sentenced him to imprisonment on Bogan once more. During his sentencing, Locke demanded that Hawk Rio reveal what he had seen in the chasm, warning the Jedi that they would call upon him again when the Dark Army from his vision came to pass. Afterward, Temple Master Ketu confronted Rio about the chasm's vision, only for Rio to reveal that his vision had differed. In his, it was Zesh who had led the Jedi, not Locke. Trill returned to the Jedi Council with Seknos Wrath, presenting herself as an ally seeking balance. Under Wrath's persuasion and the Master's trust, both her and Zesh agreed to join the Jedi Order, Zesh sharing the secrets of constructing Force sabers. At Vur Tepe, he taught Master Tem Madog and the other forgers the process, with Wrath eagerly assisting too. Unbeknownst to them, Trill sent a covert message to Skal'nas, declaring that the settled worlds were vulnerable, the Jedi were foolish, easily deceivable, and Tython was ripe for invasion. As Skal'nas prepared his forces, Trill transmitted another cryptic message, its purpose shrouded in mystery. In the aftermath of his capture, Zesh agreed to let the Jedi help restore his memory, hoping to uncover more details about his past. Recognizing his actions as proof of his readiness, the Council decided to train Zesh in the ways of balance, marking the start of his transformation into a Jedi. Meanwhile, the Order, finally listening to these dreams, prepared for war by forging Force sabers, anticipating an invasion. Some believed Zesh was destined to lead the Jedi in the battle to come, with Hawk Rio revealing this to Masters Rajivari and Ketu. Yet danger lingered in the shadows, as Trill, secretly loyal to Skal'nas, informed the Rakatan Overlord that Zesh's memory blocks had worked perfectly. The Forcehound remained unaware he was a sleeper agent. Amid this, Zesh began to see the Force as more than the dark side, slowly embracing the path of balance. Skal'nas stood on the bridge of his warship, his cruel grin reflecting the dark satisfaction of conquest. The previous worlds had fallen too easily, their defenders crushed beneath the might of the infinite empire. Sub-Predor Ceh'let stood nearby, head low, the tension in her stance betraying the fear that bound her to Skal'nas's will. Without hesitation, Skal'nas gestured toward the star map, his intent clear. Ceh'let would lead a smaller force to crush Shikakwa and the remaining colonies, leaving no trace of resistance. Skal'nas himself would descend upon Tython, the heart of the Jedi, with the full weight of his wrath. As the Rakatan fleet surged forward, the The void itself seemed to shudder, the oppressive hum of engines heralding doom. Darkness loomed over the galaxy, and the invasion began with a silence more terrifying than any battle cry. Master Ketu meditated with young Force pupils on the moon of Ashla. However, its calming tranquility was suddenly shattered by a terrifying disturbance in the Force. Rising swiftly, he ordered an evacuation of the moon base and rushed to his ship. Pupils rushed to transports as Ketu launched off, piercing through Tython's atmosphere, his thoughts heavy with the darkness he now felt gripping around him. Above, warships emerged from nowhere, dark shapes blotting out the stars. Energy beams rained down on Ashla's moon defenses, tearing through its surface as Skal'nas' fleet prepared to invade Tython. At the temple of Ceh'let, Rajivari and the pupils landed amidst the alarm. Exiting his ship, he heard a steady voice. "Defenses are ready and we are prepared, my master." Skal'nas stood on the bridge of his flagship, the glow of distant bombardments reflecting in his eyes. "The moon they call Ashla is abandoned, over Predor," reported a Lord High General. Skal'nas sneered. "Cease bombardment. Strip its resources at once." His fleet then descended upon Tython, warships darkening the skies as transports landed across the planet's key locations. Rakatan forces landed on Tythus Ridge, while war droids and slave soldiers advanced first into the river valley. In the silent desert, near the ruins of the old city, forces established staging grounds, while others spread into the dense forests of the Gnarls. Aerial units strafed defensive positions as warships rained fire ahead of the landings. The invasion unfolded with brutal precision, Skal'nas orchestrating every strike as the first blows of war shattered the Jedi's fragile peace. The Valley of the Gnarls erupted into chaos as Rakata dropships roared through the skies of Tython. Master Garanjad stood atop a rocky outcrop, his calm presence steadying the young Jedi Knights. "We defend life, not extinguish it," he reminded them. Jard commanded a defensive formation, using the terrain to funnel the Rakata's slave warriors into choke points, where Ashla Jedi wielded their Force skills to hold the line. When monstrous beasts charged, Jard coordinated an ambush, neutralizing their handlers without unnecessary bloodshed. As the Kuritai ordered the Varitai to fall back, the Rakata unleashed flesh raiders, relentless and unstoppable until death. As the Jedi regrouped, Jard sensed an overwhelming dark-side energy. The war loomed, its tension suffocating as shadows crept over the burning valley. Master Rajivari stood tall, his voice steady and commanding as he appointed Ketu as general, entrusting him with the responsibility to lead the Tython armies against the invasion. "You will guide them," Rajivari ordered, "while I rally the settled worlds to defend Shikakwa." Ketu, resolute and unshaken, immediately set to work, gathering forces and sending them to battle. Meanwhile, Rajivari turned to Hawk Rio, his trusted air commander. "Rio," he said, "I need you to organize and lead Red and Blue Squadron in air support. They are crucial for the defense." Hawk Rio, his face determined, nodded sharply and hurried to coordinate the squadrons, ensuring their readiness for the upcoming fight. With every command given, each person moved swiftly, knowing time was of the essence, and the fate of their worlds depended on their swift action. Rajivari and his fleet descended onto the hot, barren world of Maltera, where mining operations scarred the landscape under the sunspot. He met with the colony's leaders in the heart of the settlement, his calm presence cutting through the harshness of the environment. With determination, Rajivari spoke of the Rakata invasion that loomed over the system, urging the miners to unite and defend their worlds. Some of the colony's warriors listened intently, their eyes burning with the desire to protect their homes, pledging their loyalty to the Jedi's cause. Others, however, remained doubtful, questioning the sincerity of his message and the true cost of joining the fight. Despite the hesitation, Rajivari left the planet with a few thousand new recruits, their resolve clear as his fleet ascended into the blazing skies above Maltera, heading next for the settled world of Nox. The battle on Tythos Ridge raged as Zesh, Tem-Madog and Skal'nas fought side by side against the Rakata forces. Zesh's dark side powers tore through the battlefield with ruthless precision, cutting down enemies without mercy. Skal'nas, riding Butch the Rancor dragon, led a savage charge, her riders cleaving through the enemy ranks. Tem-Madog fought with skill, his blade flashing as he carved through foes. But as the Rakata forces were driven back, he stood among the wreckage, staring at his Durasteel blade. Force sabers had devastated the battlefield with ease, while Tem's weapons felt weak and ineffective by comparison. With a resolute glance, Tem turned away from the battlefield, heading for Vur-Tepe. There he would craft a new blade, one forged without the darkness, yet strong enough to stand against it. Rajivary arrived too late to stop the slaughter on Nox, a world that once thrived, now nothing more than a graveyard of ashes and broken dreams. Sub-Predor Ceh'let had unleashed a massacre, her forces wiping out everything in their path, leaving only burning ruins and the desperate cries of the dying. The Rakata had seized control, rounding up the survivors to enslave them, and offering the rest as food for the flesh raiders. Whispers of hope spread among the broken remnants. The survivors had fled to Shikakwa, clinging to the hope that its distant shores could offer refuge, though they feared it would be as haunted as the world they had lost. Nox's last breath had been taken, its soul forever corrupted by those who sought to dominate, leaving behind only ghosts and a cursed future that no one could escape. The sun blazed mercilessly over the silent desert of Tython, as Hawk Rio, Rory Fen and Jake Fen soared through the sky in Hunter-class starfighters, their engines roaring like thunder. The ancient ruins of the old city lay below them, shrouded in an eerie silence that contrasted with the chaos unfolding above. In perfect formation, the trio dove in, releasing a barrage of blinding fire upon the Rakata's Varutai and Kuratai troops, pinned within the crumbling stone walls. Hawk led the charge, weaving in and out of enemy fire with deadly precision, while Rory and Jake kept close behind, strafing the lines of Rakata soldiers below with laser precision. Explosions rocked the battlefield as the air was filled with smoke and debris, and the relentless assault from the sky left the Rakata forces scrambling for cover. In the heart of the forest of the Gnolls, a sinister quiet hangs heavy in the air, broken only by the occasional rustling of leaves. The Rakatan slave soldiers march through the dense woods, unaware of the horrors that await them. From the undergrowth, the Gundarks emerge with guttural growls, their massive forms crashing through the foliage, their claws raking through flesh. The Nashtar, with their unnatural speed and brutal teeth, strike from the shadows, dragging soldiers into the darkness before they can react. Above, the shadowed wraiths glide silently, picking soldiers from the ground one by one. And in the depths of the forest, the Tukata, ferocious beasts, stalk, their glowing eyes tracking the fear-stricken soldiers. The forest seemed to bend toward the chaos, their twisted branches reaching down like skeletal hands, suffocating all hope. Rajivary arrived to find the once vibrant world of Krevkur already in flames, its rainforest scorched, and volcanic caverns echoing with screams from the Rakata slave pits. Navigating the humid, ash-choked terrain, he descended into the underground lairs, where the enslaved civilians were held, cutting down guards with swift, balanced strikes. Freeing the prisoners, he emerged with a vengeful force behind him, rallying the oppressed people of the world. In a surge of rebellion across the steaming lakes and jungle ruins, the tide turned. Inspired by Rajivary's courage, the planet's defenders struck back in unison, overwhelming the Rakata garrisons and driving their forces into retreat. As the skies cleared and the last warships fled orbit, Krevkur stood bruised but unbroken, its fire rekindled not by the invaders, but by the will of its people. Deep within the cold steel halls of his command vessel, Skal'nas listens as his commanders deliver grim reports, menacing brass rumbling like distant thunder. Across Tython, slave legions fall in droves, defeated by rising Jedi resistance. Ceh'let's voice cuts through the tension with piercing clarity, warning that the settled world campaigns are collapsing too. Frenetic strings coil with unease as rage simmers behind Skal'nas's glare. Without hesitation, he contacts home. The Star Forge awakens at his command, thunderous percussion erupting as it forges legions anew, unendless warships and attack droids. The rhythm builds, fast, relentless, brutal, as fleets mobilize to descend upon the Tython system, metal screaming with the promise of vengeance. The next wave is coming, and Skal'nas will drown the stars in it. On the oceanic world of Kalimar, where sky-piercing spires loomed over the twin cities of Quan-Jang and Kar, and air mines drifted like sentinels above the endless waves, the final spark of defiance was lit. Beneath the sacred halls of the Stargazer's temple, Rajivary shattered the illusion of peace by exposing the Rakata's false surrender and their hidden war fleet beneath the Southern Ocean. Outrage rippled through the population, Jedi, stargazers, air miners and pit champions uniting in a thunderous revolt. Battles raged through skyways and seaborne platforms, where blaster fire scorched the storm-racked skies and ancient waters swallowed enemy vessels whole. When the final Rakatan cruiser fell, dragged beneath the waves by the weight of its lies, Kalimar stood unshackled, and the last settled world rose proudly to join the alliance. Atop the volcanic heights of Vur-Tepe, the ancient forged temple where flame met force, Tem-Madog toiled in silence, guided by visions and the whisper of Ashla. In the heart of the mountain, he unearthed a rare white kyber crystal, humming with harmony, untouched by the shadows that once birthed the dreaded Force sabers. Days bled into nights as he shaped the hilt with Jedi metallurgy, binding circuits with wisdom, etching balance into every inch. When the final piece clicked into place, the crystal sang, and with a breath the first blade ignited. A pure, white beam sprang forth, humming with serene power, a lightsaber born not of war, but of unity. Before a gathering of Jedi, Tem raised it high and declared, "The Force needs no darkness." Awe swept through the temple as the blade shimmered, untainted and true. But triumph was short-lived. The skies above Vur-Tepe split with fire as enemy ships descended, bombarding the forged temple with relentless fury. Across Tython, the Jedi launch a final coordinated counter-assault under Master Ketu's tactics. Temples united, strike teams hitting in waves, and force-powered ambushes crippling Rakatan positions. The Force sabers turn the tide, cutting through enemy armor, but their dark nature corrupts many Jedi in battle, sowing chaos as allies succumb to rage and madness. On the battlefields, Garen, Jard, and Zesh lead a brutal charge, covered by blue and red squadron destroying wave after wave of invaders from the stormy skies. As Rakatan lines break, Skal'nas orders a full retreat, his invasion collapsing. The Jedi stand victorious, but at Vur-Tepe, the forged temple lies in ruins, and rescue teams dig for survivors. Tython is saved for now, but the price is heavy and darkness still clings to those who wielded it. The Rio fortress loomed over Shikakwa, its battle-scarred walls standing as the last defense against the relentless siege that had stretched nearly a year. Bako stood firm on the ramparts, his scarred face grim as the enemy forces pressed closer, forcing the defenders back into the heart of the city. Gavana paced restlessly, his tactical mind searching for an advantage, but the odds were dire, and time was running out. Khao Dam's eyes flickered upward as streaks of light pierced the sky, signaling the arrival of Rajivari's allied fleet, engaging the Rakatan blockade in a furious orbital battle, while Sri Lan remained motionless, her silent presence radiating defiance as the dark side users around her prepared for the final stand. Far above, Rajivari broke away from the chaos, his ship streaking toward Bogan's besieged moon, where Dagan Locke was trapped, determined to extract him before the Rakatans overwhelmed the last defenders. Below, the city braced as the storm of war finally descended, the clash of armies and fleets converging in a decisive, desperate battle. The Bogan prison's oppressive gloom shuddered as Master Rajivāri, his azure blade cutting a path of serene precision, sliced through the energy cage holding Dagon Lok. The fallen warlord rose with a feral grin, his amber eyes burning with dark intent. "Took you long enough, Jedi," he sneered, snatching a guard's vibroblade. Rakata enforcers stormed in, blasters firing, while flesh raiders lunged from the shadows. Rajivāri moved like water, fluid, controlled, deflecting bolts into foes and disarming without killing where he could. Dagon, however, fought like a storm, his strikes brutal, his laughter sharp as he crushed bones and split flesh. Fighting side by side, their clash of philosophies was as stark as their blades, one seeking balance, the other dominance. Yet together they carved a path to freedom. Their ship roared away from Bogan to Rajivāri's fleet, looming over Shikakwa, an armada awaiting their command. Below at Rio Fortress, Tasha shuddered as a vision gripped her with Ter Sendun at her side, their shared warning a whisper in the Force. "Blood will drown these swamps. The storm is here." The battle above Shikakwa raged, as Sub-Predor Ceh'let's warships carved through enemy formations, their turbo-laser batteries reducing opposing vessels to burning husks that tumbled into the planet's gravity well. Amidst the chaos, a scarred command ship breached through the combat zone, its shields flaring under concentrated fire as it received precious cargo, the liberated warlord Dagon Lok and their commander Master Rajivāri. On the bridge, he acknowledged his earlier miscalculation about the invasion with a terse nod to his unlikely ally, gesturing him to take a ship below to the planet's surface where the battle for Shikakwa would soon unfold. Without ceremony, Dagon departed for the hangar bay, his armored boots ringing against the deck as he prepared to assume command of his waiting Bogan forces. As the warlord's dropship launched into the maelstrom of battle, both fleets continued their deadly dance in the void above Shikakwa, each volley causing waves of destruction and death. 1 year into the war, the space battle above Shikakwa still rages as turbo laser fire carves through the void between Rakatan and Jedi warships. Sub-Predor Ceh'let activates her comm, desperately reporting to Predor Skal'nas about the Jedi reinforcements breaking through their lines. He responds disgruntled and commands to press the attack, while giving a false promise of backup. Below on the war-torn surface, Dagon Lok strides through Rio Fortress and with a snap hiss ignites his recovered Force saber, its malevolent glow instantly commanding obedience from his gathered Bogan warriors. Meanwhile, Zesh, leading a squad of Jedi, land and charge through Shikakwa's choking atmosphere, slaying wave after wave while Shea Koda banks hard on her Rancor Dragon Butch, stitching blaster fire across enemy positions as swamp water explodes beneath them. Hawk's fighter wing squadron screams through smoke-choked skies, scattering Rakatan patrols as Rory and Jake lock onto the Annihilator emplacements, their targeting computers wailing while proton torpedoes streak toward their marks. The entire planet trembles under the combined assault as fire consumes the swamps and Shikakwa's fate hangs in the balance. Dagon Lok rallied the Bogan forces, driving the Rakatan invaders back from the city walls and into the treacherous swamps beyond. With the enemy pinned, he calmed Rajivāri at Rio Fortress, demanding reinforcements to flank the retreating Rakatans. Rajivāri acknowledged, swiftly ordering the forces of Tav, Quan-Jang, and the recently recovered Madog to converge on Dagon's position. Madog, his voice fierce, acknowledged the command and urged Quan-Jang to unleash his beasts. Together, the united forces surged forward in a devastating assault. Meanwhile, aboard the Rakatan flagship, the Sub-Predor Ceh'let reported to Skal'nas that their attack on Shikakwa had been anticipated. Half their forces were now dead, trapped in the swamp by the enemy's relentless counterattack. Skal'nas, his patience frayed, snarled orders to fall back to Skagora, letting the flesh raiders cover their retreat. "We will discuss this further then." he growled. But as the Rakatan forces attempted to withdraw, Madog, Zesh, and Sek stood firm. "They do not surrender," Madog declared. "No," Zesh agreed, his voice cold. "They are bred for one purpose, to kill." And with that, the battle raged on. Bucko crushed Rakatan's skulls with his war club as Gav Vanar slipped between trees, delivering lethal dagger strikes. Kaundam's repeater mowed down fleeing enemies while Sri Lan's twin blades whirled through the last resistance. Above, Shay and her beast riders circled wearily on tired mounts. Trill and Sek stood back to back, force sabers sputtering, as Zesh pulled a wounded Jedi from the bloodied swamp. The last of the Rakata retreated into the sky as Dagon climbed onto a wrecked skiff, raising his saber before the exhausted but victorious allies. His victory speech carried grim promise. This was just the beginning. Hawk watched with crossed arms as Rory commented on Dagon's ease in war. Shay wiped her face, silent, while Sek glared at his weapon before shutting it off. The swamp reeked of blood and burnt corpses. This battle was done, but the war was far from over. The steaming baths of Ryo Fortress echoed with tension as Seknos Wrath confronted Shay, his voice sharp with accusation. "These force sabers corrupt everything they touch," he growled, while she stood firm, her emerald green eyes flashing with defiance as she said nothing before departing. Trill then moved like liquid shadow through the mist, her fingers tracing Wrath's bare shoulders as she whispered honeyed words into his ear, a carefully played seduction meant to bend his will. Shay found Zesh alone in his room, his scarred form silhouetted against the light. "I know what Trill is," he confessed, his voice low as Shay's breath caught, not just at his words, but at how close he stood. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to just them, and she nearly closed the distance, her lips parting before she caught herself and pulled away, leaving only the ghost of what might have been hanging in the humid air. In the depths of Ryo Fortress, Zesh is tormented by nightmares of his past enslavement under the Rakata, visions so vivid they awaken Shay through their force bond. As she comforts him, he reveals his true name, Tau, a remnant of the life stolen from him when the Rakata took him as a child. The marks on his body, he explains, are the scars of his enslavement. Shay, moved by his vulnerability, confesses her love, though he struggles to understand the emotion. Yet, in that moment, their connection deepens, and they surrender to their passion. Meanwhile, on Skagora, tensions erupt as Sub-Predor Ceh'let confronts Skal'nas, accusing him of treachery, demanding to know if he is the traitor undermining their plans. Skal'nas coldly retorts, questioning whether she dares challenge his authority. He then reveals the truth, their weakening connection to the force that has driven him to seek the Mother Infinity Gate, a relic of the Qua that could restore their power. When Ceh'let foolishly assumes this means an alliance, Skal'nas unleashes his fury, electrocuting her with force lightning while snarling that he will destroy all who oppose him. As Tau and Shay find solace in each other, Skal'nas' reign of terror only grows darker. In the strategy room of Ryo Fortress, tensions rise as Rajivari, Dagon, and Zesh plot the assassination of Skal'nas, their only hope to weaken the Rakata's relentless advance. Tasha, haunted by another vision, warns of a crumbling fortress swallowed by a violent sea of blood, a grim omen focused on Anil Kesh. Though their forces are strong, Rajivari fears the Rakata's numbers and the settled world's potential betrayal. Zesh insists they strike Skal'nas now, exploiting the infighting among the Predors, and volunteers to locate him through the dark side. Using force walking, he discovers Skal'nas' hidden base in the Valley of Krau on Skagora, only for their plans to be betrayed. Unbeknownst to them, Trill leaks the assault to Skal'nas over a holocom. He smirks, commanding her to let them attack, stating it will be their downfall. The Jedi strike force descended upon the Valley of Krau, unaware of the trap awaiting them. Shay aboard her ship sensed Zesh's presence as he flew past, their force bond flaring briefly before the battle consumed them. Dagon admired Skal'nas' untouched beauty moments before the ambush erupted, flesh raiders and force hounds overwhelming his forces, as Tasha's distant vision warned too late, leaving Wrath captured in the chaos. Above, Shay dueled a force hound rider, her rage fueling the darkness until Quan-Jang intervened, cautioning her against its pull, while below, Trill lured Zesh into the labyrinthine tunnels, their fates now entwined in the shadows beneath the war-torn valley. Deep in the underground caverns, Zesh chases after Trill, however, stumbles upon rows of Jedi prisoners, trapped in pulsating, energy-draining pods, their life force slowly siphoned away. A horrific fate he realizes will soon spread to all upon Tython. Before he can react, Trill strikes from the shadows, her fingers crackling with crimson lightning as she delivers a brutal shock to his skull. As darkness swallows him, her betrayal burns brighter than the pain. She had always seen him as nothing more than a tool to manipulate, and now his purpose was served. The cavern echoes with her silent triumph, the prisons humming ominously in the gloom. The battle on Skal'nas rages in chaotic fury, as Madog, consumed by the dark side, carves through flesh raiders with brutal delight, his every strike dripping with savage pleasure. Nearby, Shay fights with equal fury, her own darkness flaring, until she senses Quan-Jang's hesitation and screams, "Master, here!" just as he leaps onto the back of her Rancor Dragon, Butch. Panting, Quan demands answers. Where is Locke? Sek was with him. Why aren't they responding? Shay's mind flashes to Zesh, his presence smothered in shadow, but Quan barks back, "Your attachment is a weakness. Act like a warrior." Taking command, he rallies the scattered troops in Locke's absence until the tide turns against them. Shay, surrounded, slashes wildly, but Quan's voice booms over the carnage. "Retreat!" The order clashing with her rage as the Jedi forces fall back, leaving behind a valley of only death. Wrath stirs inside the force-siphoning chamber, his muscles screaming as the Rakatan machinery leeches his force energy. Across the shadowed slave pens, Trill strides between shackled prisoners, her fingertips alive with jagged lightning as she carves agony into their bodies, each cry tightening Wrath's jaw. When her cold gaze meets his, she whispers encouragement, urging him to embrace the fury boiling in his veins, to let hate be his key. But as her footsteps fade into the gloom, Wrath does the unthinkable. He releases his rage. His breathing steadies, his mind clears, and in that moment of icy calm, he focuses all his energy as his cage explodes, shattered not by anger, but by the quiet defiance of a Jedi unbroken. He then begins to free the prisoners of war. Skal'nas rips through Zesh's mind aboard his command ship, unlocking his stolen memories. Zesh resists, but only for a moment before surrendering to the darkness once more. He reveals the Jedi Seer's visions, the ones thwarting the Rakata's plans. Dragging Zesh to the imprisoned Dagon, Skal'nas demands answers. Dagon laughs, calling them mad until Zesh twists his mind, forcing the truth. The Infinity Gate lies hidden in Tython's chasm. With a cruel grin, Skal'nas merges his power with Zesh and Trill, commanding them to strike at the Seers. At Anil Kesh, the Seers gasp as visions of the Rakatan invasion flood their minds, only for Zesh's shadow to rise before them, blinding them all in an instant. Ter Senden staggers as darkness swallows their sight, while Tasha realizes the truth: Zesh has betrayed them, and Anil Kesh is the Rakata's true target. Rajivari orders all forces back to Tython immediately. Meanwhile, in his chains, Dagon smirks as he underestimated Zesh's power, but vows that when he escapes, that he shall be the first to die. The Seer's chamber at Anil Kesh pulsed with latent energy as Tasha and Ters knelt before Anang's holocron, its intricate mechanisms resisting until the final crystal clicked into place with a sound like cracking ice. The artifact shuddered to life, its layers spinning wildly before erupting into a holographic vision of the Tho-Yor, not as creators, but destroyers, their power capable of unraveling the Infinity Gate itself. Anang's ghostly voice echoed through the chamber. You seek answers, but truth demands sacrifice. A seer must die to awaken Tython. And as the words faded, the holocron dimmed, leaving only heavy silence. Turs exhaled sharply. "Then it falls to me," he murmured, and before Tasha could protest, the temple itself seemed to respond, the ground trembling and walls groaning, as if the planet had been waiting centuries for this very moment. The air grew heavy as Shay-Koda and Quan-Jang stood before the ancient temple of Anil-Kesh, their senses prickling with the approaching darkness, while Tasha emerged from the temple with urgent news for the gathered commanders, revealing Anang's holocron as she warned of the Rakata's true purpose on Tython. Above them, the final invasion erupted as Hawk Rio's Red Squadron clashed with swarming Rakata fighters, their ships taking heavy damage before he called for retreat and reinforcements, prompting Rory and Jake's Blue Squadron to launch from Tython's surface to cover their withdrawal, while below, Master Ketu relayed the dire situation to Rajivari, mobilizing the ground forces for the impending invasion. Aboard the Rakata flagship, the Ravager, Skal'nas watched with cold calculation, forbidding orbital bombardment to preserve Anil-Kesh, as he ordered the Flesh Raiders to be unleashed under Trill's command, while Zesh stood ready for bloodshed and Dagon remained bound in chains. The second battle for Tython had begun, its fate hanging in the balance between the defenders' resolve and the invaders' relentless advance. The Rakata unleashed their full forces upon Tython, landing near Anil-Kesh with brutal intent. Trill leads the assault, cutting down Jedi in a furious rampage as the forest perimeter becomes a battlefield. Quan-Jang responds by releasing all the beasts of Anil-Kesh to defend the sacred temple. Shay rallies the creatures, charging alongside fellow Ashla and Bogan warriors to repel the invaders and protect their home. Blue and Red Squadrons soar into action, securing the aerial perimeter around Anil-Kesh to prevent Rakata advancements. Meanwhile, word reaches Madog and Rajivari from Vur-Tepe that the First Blade remains lost, hidden deep within the ancient ruins. As the battle rages, Tython itself reacts to the bloodshed, summoning violent force storms that tear across the battlefield, adding complete chaos between the clash of light and darkness. Amidst the chaos of the second battle for Tython, Jedi Master Garen Jad and his apprentice Kalabrin led the Ashla vanguard with Master Ketu, their force-imbued blades clashing in unison as they carved through the advancing Rakatan legions, while behind them ranks of warriors followed, their blades gleaming against the smoke-choked battlefield. Above, Jake and Rory Fenn's starfighters weaved desperately through the crimson plasma fire until a Rakatan annihilator blast tore through Jake's ship, reducing it and him to a fireball that hurled down into the battlefield. Rory's screams echoed across the comms before Hawk Rio cut through her rage, his voice trying to calm her grief with a command to focus. Below, Master Ketu barked orders to fall back to the mountain frontier as the Jedi lines buckled under the onslaught, and above it all, Tython's wrath manifested further violent force storms that split the sky, hurling warriors and wreckage alike into the maelstrom. The Rakatan tide surged against the Jedi defenses at the mountain frontier, where Master Rajivari, Master Ketu, and Madog stood as the final bulwark before Anil-Kesh. Ashla and Bogan warriors fought side by side, their blades, imbued with light and dark, flashing against the crimson-armored Rakata. Force storms raged above, hurling debris and bodies into the sky, while below, the ground trembled under the thunder of war. Rajivari's blade danced in lethal arcs, his mind sharp as he conjured telekinetic assaults. Ketu, a pillar of calm amidst chaos, rallied the faltering lines, cutting down enemies and deflecting plasma fire. Madog, ever the storm, waded into the fray, his dark side-fueled strikes cutting down Rakatan champions, until a force hound, swift as death, impaled him through the chest. As the light faded from Madog's eyes, he gripped Rajivari's arm, his final words a warning etched in urgency. The First Blade must be found, or darkness would consume them all like it has him. Then the storm swallowed his body, and the battle raged on, Anil Kesh's fate hanging in the balance. The battle at Anil Kesh thundered in the distance as Skal'nas landed in the ruins of the old city, guarded by Zesh, and dragging a chained Dagon Lok through the dust while war raged beyond sight. Forced to lead them into the crumbling tunnels beneath, Dagon moved with the weight of terrible memory as Tho'yor glyphs pulsed along the walls, marking the path toward the chaos wall that had once shattered his mind. Zesh hesitated as the wall's psychic presence slithered into his awareness, but Skal'nas pushed forward undeterred by the danger, consumed with visions of the Prime Infinity Gate's power. Dagon laughed darkly at the thought of anyone surviving the wall's madness, especially not a Rakatan, but Skal'nas struck him down, declaring his certainty that the legends were true and this Qua relic could transport him anywhere. He commanded Zesh to focus on the Tho'yor symbols as their key through the barrier. Doing so, he broke through, taking Skal'nas with him, leaving Dagon behind as bait for the Flesh Raiders. Above the ruins, Shekoda suddenly turned, her senses piercing through stone and shadow to where Zesh wandered below. While the war rages outside Anil Kesh's walls, Ters and Tasha meditate, unlocking Anang's holocron again as his voice echoes. The time has come for Tython to awaken. Meanwhile, Dagon, surrounded by Flesh Raiders, breaks free, seizing an orange force saber and begins cutting them down, until one leaps onto him. As they struggle, Ceh'let appears out of nowhere and blasts the creature away, saving him. "How did you find me?" Dagon growls. "I stole a ship, sensed Zesh, and followed you from Skagora. I will kill him," he snarled. "Get in line," Dagon smirks, sparking a competition. Whoever slays the most Flesh Raiders earns first strike. Elsewhere, Shay tracks them through the old city's secret tunnels, sensing Zesh's presence. Dagon reveals to them both that they have gone through the Chaos Wall ahead. With a twist of the Force, he imprints Tython's sigil into Shay's mind. "Ugh, get off me," she snaps. "Thank me later," he retorts as they leap into the unknown as he force pushes Wrath, leaving him behind. Skal'nas and Zesh pushed through to the Infinity Gate, where he reveled in his triumph, his voice dripping with malice as he gloated over the impending doom he would unleash upon them all. Meanwhile, Quan caught up with Ceh'let, breathlessly asking where Shay had vanished to, his urgency cutting through the tension. The scene shifted to Shay and Dagon, standing in the shadows as Dagon whispered dark promises, his voice smooth and sinister. He admired the darkness coiled within Shay, urging her to embrace it, to remember Zesh's betrayal and let it fuel her rage. Back with Ceh'let, he cursed as his comms crackled uselessly, asking Quan to warn the others above of the horrors unfolding below. Quan hesitated, torn, before Trill suddenly appeared, her arrival igniting a furious clash with her Flesh Raiders. Words turned to violence as Ceh'let and Trill argued, her betrayal flaring his temper until in a flash of rage, Ceh'let seized Trill, crackling energy surging through his hands as he unleashed a devastating lightning orb, sending her crashing to the ground. Quang's voice rang out in protest, "Sek, balance." Before the damage was done, Sek knocked her unconscious, falling to the ground as emotion surged through his being. With a thunderous boom, Dagon and Shay burst into the chamber, their blades igniting as they begin the final battle. Dagon lunges at Skal'nas, his mind-twisting powers lashing out like vipers, but Skal'nas merely smirks, deflecting the assault and turning it back on him. Dagon's eyes widen as his own fears consume him, his body locking in terror before Skal'nas drives a saber straight through his chest, sending him crashing to the ground. Meanwhile, Shay locks blades with Zesh, her voice desperate yet firm. "I can sense the conflict within you. You won't kill me." Zesh snarls in response, his memories of destruction flooding back. "I am the destroyer of worlds, the bringer of death. You cling to false hope. I am a force hound." Shay's voice cracks with fury. "No! I took you into my heart. Don't lie. Not to me. Not to yourself. You are not Zesh the slave. You are Tau, Choose. Skal'nas, watching with cold amusement, barks an order. Kill her, now! As the infinity gate behind him begins to hum with ominous power, its ancient mechanisms grinding to life. Shay's eyes lock onto Zesh's, pleading, as Skal'nas throws back his head and laughs, the fate of all hanging in the balance. In the lowest level of Anil Kesh's reactor shaft, suspended above a gaping chasm, Tasha clutched the holocron as Tur stood beside her. Anang's voice echoed ominously, declaring the time had come to awaken the Tho'yor. Tasha, her connection to the Force lost, but not truly severed, accepted her fate, though the Qua warned her mortal form would perish. Turs desperately pleaded to take her place, but Tasha refused. Only a seer could fulfill this destiny. With a final, sorrowful goodbye, she embraced her fate. Meanwhile, before the pulsing infinity gate, Skal'nas sneered as Zesh hesitated, urging Shay to surrender. It's too late. But Shay, defiant even as Skal'nas's force lightning arced toward her, cried out, I forgive you, I love you. Enraged, Skal'nas snarled, Must I do your work, Force Hound? Love is a lie. Power is everything. Before Zesh, in a sudden act of defiance, lunged at him, Tasha transcended, merging with the Force in a radiant burst of light, finally understanding the true purpose of the Tho'yor. High above, Hawk and Rory streaked past one of the ancient ships as its sigil flared to life, while Tur's urgency in his voice told Rajivari to evacuate Anil Kesh immediately. The battle reaches its cataclysmic climax as Zesh and Skal'nas clash in a furious duel, their blades ringing through the chaos, until, with a final decisive strike, Zesh drives his weapon through Skal'nas, who lets out a dying roar as his body falls down into the infinity gate, consumed by the darkness he sought to control. In that moment, Zesh embraces his true identity as Tau, no longer a weapon, but a man reborn. Shay rushes to his side, and as the temple begins to fall, Butch arrives in the nick of time, pulling Shay to safety as they recover Dagon and flee the crumbling chasm under Anil Kesh. Above them, the Tho'yor ships awaken in wrath, their ancient power unleashed as they tear through the Rakata Armada, reducing their forces to ash. Overwhelmed and broken, they begin to scatter in disarray, abandoning the war in desperate retreat as the very foundations of their conquest collapse around them. As the dust settled amidst the ruins of Anil Kesh, the remaining Jedi survivors surveyed the devastation wrought by the conflict. Rajivari, his voice heavy with resignation, declared that the planet had become unstable, its sacred temples reduced to rubble, no longer a place fit for their kind. The Flesh Raiders had fled into the treacherous Riftlands, and Dagon, his resolve unshaken, vowed that he would not rest until they were utterly crushed and the Rakata threat fully extinguished. With that, he departed with his Bogan followers, his Force saber ready for blood, determined to hunt down their remaining enemies. Elsewhere, beneath the golden canopy of the silent desert, Tau and Shay lingered in the fading light, their hands brushing as if drawn together by an unspoken promise. Then, as the breeze carried the scent of desert plum through the air, Tau turned to Shay, his gaze filled with unspoken devotion. Their lips met in a slow, tender kiss, a fleeting yet perfect moment, as if the chaos of the world had stilled just for them. The remaining Jedi, including Tave, Quan-Jang and Ketu, stood before the funeral pyres, flames climbing skyward as they bid their fallen comrades farewell. May the Force be with you all. Nearby, Rory Fenn wept over Jake's pyre with Hawk Rio's hand on her shoulder as she cries echoing in anguish before turning away, saying their farewells as they left the Order behind for solace on Shikakwa. Elsewhere, Seknos Wrath loomed in front of Trill's dark prison cell, his voice cold. You lost, now you will suffer as we have, as he vanishes into the shadows, leaving her screams fading and unanswered. Days later, in the ruins of Vurtepe, Rajivari climbed free, clutching onto the First Blade's hilt, its weight heavy with purpose. The storm above still raged, Yet in his grip, the weapon hummed, not with the ghosts of the past, but with the promise of a hopeful future. The schism had been inevitable as Master Rajivari's warnings echoed to all Jedi. The order was broken, its balance lost, its teachings flawed. But where he saw corruption demanding reformation, Master Ketu saw only heresy. And when their final argument shattered like glass, Ketu departed with those who still believed in balance of the Ashlar and Bogan, leaving behind Rajivari and those loyal to him. Months later, as the dawn illuminated the pillars of Ceh'let's ancient temple, Rajivari raised his hands before the newly gathered faithful, Quan-Jang's steady wisdom, Ter's Senden's piercing intellect, and Karla Bryn's tranquility standing beside him, and proclaimed, "What was broken shall be remade. You stand as the first Jedi." As the first High Council, they forged their covenant not in compromise, but in absolutes. "There is no emotion, there is peace," Garen declared. "There is no ignorance, there is knowledge," Ters affirmed. "There is no passion, there is serenity," Karla spoke, until Rajivari, his eyes lighting up with the fire of prophecy, completed their doctrine with one final, unyielding truth. There is no chaos, there is harmony, thus forming a new order, the Jedi Order.